I never intended to buy a lake. My plan was simple: escape the noise of the city, find a quiet cabin in the woods, and finally breathe again. After losing my wife 2 years ago, I needed space. Space to mourn, space to heal, and space to remember who I was without the weight of constant reminders. That's how I stumbled upon it. Hidden between two rolling hills, the lake sat abandoned, a ghost of what it once had been. Old photographs I found in the county records showed it was once the heart of the town. People picnicking along the shoreline, fishing tournaments in the summer, ice skating in the winter. But now, it was dry, cracked earth surrounded by weeds. The dam had broken years back and nobody had bothered to fix it. Developers tried to buy it for cheap landfills. The town's HOA declared it non-recreational land. To most people, it was worthless. But when I stood there, I didn't see death. I saw a chance, for the lake, and maybe for me too. I used nearly all of my savings to purchase it. Friends called me crazy. What's the point of buying a dried up hole in the ground? They asked. But grief does something strange to you. It makes you search for things you can bring back to life, because deep inside you wish you could do the same for the people you've lost. Restoration wasn't easy. For months, I worked with my own hands, clearing brush, pulling rusted cans and broken glass from the lakebed, fixing the old dam with help from a retired engineer who believed in my dream. I learned how to divert the nearby creek, how to line the basin so the water would stay, how to let nature breathe again. Neighbors would stop by and shake their heads. "It'll never work," they muttered. But slowly, water trickled back. Then it spread. Then, one morning, I woke up and saw mist rising over a surface of water that hadn't existed for nearly 20 years. The lake was alive again. With water came life. Ducks returned, fish swam, children started coming with fishing rods. Even strangers would sit by the water just to watch the sunset. For the first time in years, I felt peace. But peace, it seemed, wasn't meant to last. One afternoon, a group of well-dressed men and women pulled up in shiny cars. They carried clipboards and the smugness of people used to power. At the front was a sharp-faced woman in a tailored blazer. She introduced herself as the president of the local HOA. "You've done quite a bit of work here," she said, her voice as sweet as vinegar. "But unfortunately, this property falls under HOA jurisdiction. By the bylaws, the lake, and all access to it, belongs to the association. You'll need to cease your activities immediately." I laughed at first, thinking it was a mistake. I showed them my deed. "I bought this land fair and square. The lake is mine. I've spent months restoring it." But they just smirked. "Deeds don't override community bylaws. We'll be filing a claim." That night I sat by the water, heart pounding. I had poured everything into this lake. My money, my grief, my hope. And now they wanted to take it all away. The HOA wasn't bluffing. A week later, I received a thick envelope full of legal documents. They were suing me for control of the lake, claiming it was community property, even though the town had abandoned it decades ago. Fear clawed at me. I didn't have money for endless lawyers. They had influence, connections, and resources I could never match. But I had something they didn't: the truth, and the love of the people who had started gathering around the lake again. When I told the kids who came fishing that I might lose the lake, their faces fell. Parents offered to help. Retired locals shared stories of the lake's past, swearing they'd testify that the HOA had long neglected it. A small town lawyer, once a fisherman himself, offered his services for free, saying, "This lake belongs with the man who brought it back, not the ones who left it for dead." The court battle was grueling. The HOA argued with arrogance, waving bylaws and papers like weapons. I stood there with trembling hands but steady voice, telling the judge how I had bought the land legally, how I restored it with nothing but sweat and stubbornness, how I opened it freely for the community. Not for profit but for healing. In the end, the judge leaned back and looked over the room. The HOA abandoned this property. They had every chance to maintain it, but chose to let it die. This man revived it, owns it, and shares it. The court sides with him. The gavel struck, and I nearly collapsed with relief. The HOA stormed out, furious. But the people cheered. That night, families gathered around the lake, lanterns glowing, laughter ringing across the water. And for the first time since my wife passed, I felt her with me, not in grief, but in peace. I realized something then. The lake wasn't just about water or land. It was about life. About fighting for beauty when others give up. About holding on when the world tells you to let go. And so, if you're watching this, remember, no one can take away the things you've poured your heart into. Fight for them. Protect them. Because sometimes, in saving something broken, you just might save yourself. Winning in court should have felt like the end of the story. But life doesn't tie itself neatly into endings. It keeps moving, testing you, asking what you'll do with the victories you've been given. The lake was mine now. Legally. Officially. No HOA could ever lay their hands on it again. But as I stood on the shore that evening, watching the ripples roll in under a setting sun, I realized it wasn't really mine. Not in the way ownership is written on a deed. The lake belonged to everyone who loved it, everyone who remembered it, everyone who still found something healing in its quiet waters. I thought back to the nights I worked alone with nothing but a lantern, hammering boards into the dam until my fingers bled. Nights when grief nearly crushed me, when I almost gave up. And now, just 2 years later, children were laughing where silence used to be, couples held hands on the pier, and the lake reflected the world like a mirror that had been broken and carefully pieced back together. That's when I made my decision. Instead of closing the lake off, instead of fencing it or charging entry, I opened it wider. I formed a trust. The Friends of Willow Lake. Every donation, every hand that volunteered, went to keeping the lake alive. People came in droves. Teenagers painted benches. Veterans built docks. Retirees planted flowers along the paths. The lake became a heartbeat again, not just for me, but for the whole community. One day, a young boy came running up to me, holding a small fish he'd caught with wide, shining eyes. "Mister," he said, breathlessly, "this is the first fish I've ever caught." I smiled, ruffling his hair. "You'll remember this day for the rest of your life," I told him. And in that moment, I knew. I had given him something no lawsuit, no HOA, no piece of paper could take away. But, perhaps the most unexpected gift was the healing it gave me. For months after my wife's passing, I felt like the world had ended. I couldn't laugh, couldn't hope, couldn't breathe without feeling the weight of loss pressing on my chest. But as the lake filled, so did my heart. It was as if she was there in every ripple, in every breeze that crossed the water, in every child's laugh that echoed across the shore. The lake had carried me back to life. The HOA. They still sent their letters, tried to stir trouble. But their voices grew quieter as the voices of the people grew louder. Every time they tried to challenge me, the community stood shoulder to shoulder, proving that power doesn't always lie in money or bylaws. It lies in people choosing to protect what matters. And so, when I look at the lake now, I don't see an old man's fight against a heartless board. I see proof that when you refuse to give up on something broken, whether it's a place, a dream, or yourself, it can rise again, stronger than before.